Okay, so you know how everyone's kind of freaking out about 5G, all the radio waves and stuff? Yeah. Well, we're going to dive into that today.
Yeah, it's a hot topic for sure. Lots of public concern about 5G and RF exposure in general. Makes sense that people have questions, for sure.
So we've been looking at a bunch of expert opinions and research on 5G safety, especially compared to the older 3G and 4G tech that we've been using forever, to see if we can, cut through the noise.
Exactly, and what we found is pretty interesting. Might even flip your whole perspective on this whole thing.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Flipping perspectives. You got to give me more.
Well, basically, the idea that 5G is super dangerous and 3G and 4G are fine might get totally backward.
Okay, now that's a twist. So, everyone's pointing at these 5G towers popping up everywhere, saying they're the biggest source of RF exposure. What's the actual story there?
The experts we've been reading, they pretty much all agree that your phone is a way bigger source of RF exposure than those towers, you see.
Really? That's surprising. You'd think those huge towers would be blasting us with way more RF than our little phones.
It's all about how close the source of the RF is to your body and how much power it's using. Your phone is right there in your hand or your pocket, super close to you. And when it's far from a tower, especially those older 3G and 4G towers, it has to crank up the power to stay connected. It's practically yelling to reach the tower.
Gotcha. So it's like yelling across a field versus talking to someone right next to you.
Exactly. But a closer 5G tower means your phone can just whisper and still get a good signal. That's a big part of why 5G could actually be better for us in terms of RF exposure.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's not just about the towers themselves, but how our phones interact with them. But isn't there something about the different types of RF used in each generation of mobile tech? Don't some frequencies penetrate deeper into our bodies?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Those older 3G and 4G frequencies, they can go pretty deep, inches deep into your body, reaching skin, fat, muscle, even getting close to your bones.
Whoa, inches. That seems like a lot. What about 5G? Those frequencies are way higher, aren't they? So do they go even deeper?
Actually, no, it's the opposite. The millimeter wave or mmWave frequencies that some 5G networks use, they're super high frequency and they barely even penetrate the skin. Only about 1 millimeter. And the thing about SAR, that specific absorption rate, which measures how much RF energy your body absorbs, it's generally higher per watt at those older, deeper penetrating frequencies.
So higher frequency doesn't equal more risk. That's kind of counterintuitive.
Yeah, it is. A lot of people think that higher frequency automatically means more dangerous, but that's not really how it works with RF, with stuff like X-rays. Yeah, higher frequency means more energy and more potential for damage. But the radio frequencies we're talking about with mobile tech, they're non-ionizing. So they don't have enough energy to break apart molecules like X-rays can. In this part of the electromagnetic spectrum, higher frequency actually usually means less penetration. Some experts even think that millimeter wave 5G could be the safest type of RF we've ever used for communication, precisely because it doesn't penetrate deep into our bodies.
Wow, that's a really different way to think about it. Now, you mentioned something about 4G frequencies being similar to the ones used in microwave ovens. Is that right? That sounds a little scary.
Yeah, it is. A little bit of a weird connection, right? The frequencies used by 4G phones, usually around 2.45 gigahertz. That's the same frequency that micro ovens use to heat up your food.
Oh, wow. Okay. I'm guessing our phones aren't going to cook us from the inside out.
Haha, no, definitely not. The big difference is the power level. Phones use a tiny fraction of the power that a microwave oven does, but the way those waves interact with your body at that frequency is kind of similar in terms of how deep they can go. We're talking about around 1.25 inches of penetration at 2.45 gigahertz. So while your phone won't cook you like a burrito, it's still something to think about.
So again, the 5G millimeter wave set doesn't have that deeper penetration. All right, so we've talked about the towers and the frequencies. What about how the data itself is transmitted? Does that play a role in our exposure?
Yeah, totally. For 5G is designed for super fast speeds, which means your phone doesn't have to transmit for as long to send or receive data. Less time transmitting means less overall RF exposure.
Right, so it's like with 5G, you get these quick bursts of data, and then it's quiet again.
Exactly. It's kind of like a sprint versus a marathon. With older 3G and early 4G, your phone was often sending a constant background signal just to stay connected, even when you weren't actively using it. But 5G, with its beamforming and other fancy tech, it can get the data exchange done super quick and then basically go silent for a bit.
Right, and beamforming, that's another thing we hear a lot about with 5G. Can you explain what that is and how it affects our exposure?
Sure. So beamforming is this cool thing where the 5G antennas can send focused beams of energy directly to your phone instead of radiating RF in all directions like older technologies did. It's like shining a spotlight on your phone instead of just having a light bulb that lights up the whole room.
Ah, okay, I get it. So more targeted, less wasted energy.
Yep, exactly. And that means less RF floating around in the environment in general. Plus, newer 5G phones are designed to be more efficient too. They have smarter power management, and they use directional antennas that work with the network to reduce the amount of RF they need to use. So ironically, someone who's worried about 5G but is still using an old 3G or 4G phone might actually be exposing themselves to more RF overall. Huh.
That's a good point. So holding on to old tech, thinking it's safer, could actually be doing the opposite?
Yeah, pretty much. The older technologies are just less efficient when it comes to RF exposure.
So let's go back to those 5G towers for a minute. Why are people so worried about them? And what's the truth about how much they actually contribute to our individual RF exposure?
Well, think about it. Cell towers in general, 5G or not, they're usually pretty far away from where people are. They're often mounted high up, and the power they use is spread out over a large area and lots of users. Your phone, on the other hand, is right next to your body, and it's constantly adjusting its power output based on how far it is from the nearest tower.
So wait, are you saying closer towers are actually better for us?
Yeah, in a way, yes. A closer tower means your phone doesn't have to work as hard to connect, so it can use less power. And that means less RF exposure for you. It's counterintuitive, but it makes sense when you think about it. Huh.
Okay, so maybe having a 5G tower in my neighborhood isn't such a bad thing after all. It could actually help my phone chill out a bit.
Exactly. A new 5G tower can help spread out the network traffic and make it easier for your phone to connect, which means it can use less power. The bottom line is, the closest transmitter is almost always going to be the biggest source of your RF exposure, and that's your phone.
Okay, that's really starting to make sense. It feels like we've been looking at the wrong villain this whole time. Now let's get a little nerdy and talk about the science of distance. How does the distance between a device and our bodies affect RF exposure?
So there's this thing called free space path loss. It's a fancy way of saying that the power of a radio wave gets weaker the farther it travels. Just like a light bulb seems dimmer the further away you are from it. Same principle applies to RF. So if you compare a phone held 2 inches from your head to a cell tower hundreds of feet away, the difference in how much RF actually reaches your head is massive.
Like, can you quantify that for us? Just how big is the difference?
Let's say we're talking about a frequency commonly used in 4G networks, around 2.45 gigahertz. If you do the math for a phone 2 inches from your head versus a tower 100 feet away, even if they were transmitting at the same power, which they're not, because the phone has to increase its power to reach the tower, the signal from your phone would be millions of times stronger at your head than the signal from the tower.
Millions of times? Okay, that is wild, right?
It really shows you where the real exposure is coming from. And that calculation doesn't even take into account how phones boost their power when they have a weak signal. So the real-world difference in exposure is probably even bigger.
And on top of that, there's the inverse square law, which I vaguely remember from high school physics. How does that factor in?
Yeah, the inverse square law is super important here. Basically, it says that the intensity of any type of radiation, including RF, decreases proportionally to the square of the distance from the source. So double the distance, the intensity drops by a factor of 4, triple the distance, it drops by a factor of 9, and so on. Even a small increase in distance can make a big difference.
Give us a real-world example. How does this play out with our phones?
Okay, so let's say you're talking on your phone, holding it 2 inches from your ear. Now switch to speakerphone and hold the phone 2 feet away. That's 12 times the distance. And because of the inverse square law, you've potentially reduced your RF exposure by a factor of about 144, just by making that simple change.
Wow, that's a huge difference for such a small adjustment. So with all this in mind, what are some things people can do if they're worried about RF exposure?
A few key things. First, as we just talked about, increasing the distance between your phone and your body is super important. Use speakerphone or headphones whenever you can, especially for long calls. Second, try not to keep your phone right against your body, in your pocket, or bra all the time when you're not using it. Third, take advantage of airplane mode when you can, like when you're sleeping or in areas with bad reception. That stops your phone from constantly searching for a signal at full power. And finally, considering what we've learned about 5G, it might actually be a good idea to upgrade to a newer 5G phone. They're designed to be much more efficient with RF, and they use technologies like beamforming that can reduce your overall exposure compared to older phones struggling to connect on older networks.
So basically, our fear of 5G towers might have been misplaced. It sounds like the real focus should be on how we use our own devices, especially if we're still holding on to those old 3G and 4G phones.
Yeah, exactly. People are freaking out about these big, scary 5G towers. But the truth is, our personal habits with our phones probably play a much bigger role in how much RF we're exposed to.
This has been really eye-opening. It sounds like if we're truly concerned about RF exposure, we might need to rethink some of our assumptions. Maybe embracing 5G and being more mindful of how we use our devices is actually the smarter approach.
That's a great takeaway. This whole conversation definitely raises some important questions for all of us. How does this new information change your perspective on RF safety? Maybe it's time to reevaluate your own tech habits and how you think about different generations of mobile technology.